Mayfield, possibly out of Cleveland. You want to be a boss? That's how you be a boss. I did. I made a mistake.
Afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. I know a lot of people listen to us all around the globe. Dan Dakich here, wishing everybody have a holly jolly Christmas. Hope you had a great Christmas. Hope you had a lot of time to spend with your family. Hope you had a lot of time to sit back, relax, enjoy, eat, drink, and be merry and watch a lot of football. I got to tell you, a lot of basketball, college basketball, conference seasons heating up. We got Tom Crean coming up. The Titans continue to tighten down. My daughter, big Titan fan, she's screaming, tighten up. And, well, guess what? The Titans are not tightening up. Trevor Lawrence apparently is becoming the second coming of Joe Montana. We have a question as we start today. The world that we live in is starting to allow shoplifting, meaning clowns can come into a store and take stuff and run out. And in my wife's case, they tell you at Athleta in the not the Franklin Park Mall. What are we talking about? In the Keystone Mall, don't do it. You'll be seen as racist. True story. They tell her, don't do it. Particularly if it's an African-American person. We don't need the hassle of being called racist. Well, on this show, we celebrate. You've seen us on this show show the guys at Best Buy tackling shoplifters. Well, here's another one. Lady tries to shoplift. Store owner says, we ain't letting you out, baby. You ain't getting out. Look at this. This is glorious. You ain't getting out. No, you're trying to steal. We ain't letting you clowns out. Ain't happening. Ain't happening on our watch. Nope. Ain't letting these guys out. Nope. This lady's saying, I'm paying for my stuff. You all ain't paying. You all sick. They ain't letting them.
You have to pay. Go. Never come back. That's all I need.
There you go. There you go.
I'm taking.
Don't let them out. Screw that. Don't let them out. Hey, look, we celebrate. Now, I get it. It's kind of stupid because if you don't let them out, what are you going to do? Die over some clothes? But I don't care. We celebrate it here on this show. We celebrate it here. We celebrate it all the time. We want more people doing it. Because, look, you can't just say, hey, look, don't let him go. Let him go. Let him go. If it's a white dude, let him go. African-American, let him go. Just let him go. I mean, there's stories. You see it all the time of people putting them in backs. I like the guys from Best Buy. Boom, they're going to tackle you. Ain't nothing wrong with that. God bless you. Love it long time. All right. Black Monday is basically the day when coaches get fired in the NFL. However, we saw Nathaniel Hackett get fired yesterday. Nathaniel Hackett, 15 games in with the Broncos. Really, you're at the mercy, I believe. I think we'd all believe you're at the mercy of a quarterback. You're at the mercy of the guy under center. And let's be totally honest here. When Russell Wilson came over from Seattle to Denver in that monster deal, myself, I was always one of those guys that said, look, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Russell Wilson, and you know my affinity for Lamar Jackson. I love Lamar Jackson. And Lamar Jackson, you got the ball, you're down 2. I want those guys with the football. Don't argue with me. Russell Wilson runs around. Russell Wilson finds people. Russell Wilson, I thought, had a clutch gene. But you know what happened here? Russell Wilson, for whatever the reason, wanted to leave Seattle. Seattle wanted Russell Wilson to leave. And here's the deal that GMs don't look at. The question is why? In a league that's so based on quarterbacks, and I'm going to talk the same thing about the Colts. Why? Why did Seattle want Wilson to leave? Why was there angst between Pete Carroll and their legendary quarterback? Why? See, when you go to a different franchise, particularly one with a guy like John Elway running the franchise, Elway had so much success as a player. He brought Peyton Manning over. They won a Super Bowl. He's the Gazda. He's the guy. He can fix you. He can fix you. If you're a cat, he'll fix you. If you need a date, he'll fix you. Business gone bad, Elway will fix you. Want to know how to do anything? Elway will get it done for you. That's why they never ask general managers. They never go back and say, okay, what happened here? See, when I was coaching basketball, I had a lot of kids transfer. I was a mean coach, too tough. Morning workouts, I was just too tough kids to transfer. And I would watch a kid go to another program. And I would never hear from that coach. Hey, Dan, what'd you think of so-and-so? Huh? Hey, Dan. And it would be inevitable. I could literally pick out which kids might be successful and which kids had no chance. And the might be successfuls was about 1 in 10. Nobody bothers to ask why. I asked Urban Meyer one time, how many NFL teams call you about players? What are you talking about? Very few. Only guys that I know. People don't call me. If I were a scout, I'd be on the phone with the head coach today, tomorrow, the next day. And if the head coach is going to lie to me, fine. It's my job to figure it out. But nobody wants to ask why. Why did Russell Wilson leave? Let me ask you a question, Atlanta. Why are you so eager to get rid of Matt Ryan and bring Marcus Mariota in here? I look like I'm talking to somebody, right? That's the question. Why? Look, when Atlanta basically gave Matt Ryan to the Colts, everybody's toes were tapping. Everybody said, this is great. When the big signings came, first by Russell Wilson, and let me go through this with you, $242,588,236. That's what Wilson signed a 5-year deal. $161 million guaranteed. $50 million handed over to him as a signing bonus. Now, I want you to think about that. Hey, okay, Russell, says here, let me see here. Oh, says here that we're going to pay you $50 million right here. $48,517,644 in annual salary for 12 touchdowns. For 12 touchdowns. Now, I'm asking you, which is a worse situation, the Colts or the Broncos? Because this is what's going to happen in coaching. There's no way you keep Jeff Saturday. Nathaniel Hackett's already gone. There'll be others gone, but these are the two people are talking about right now because they're open, including Carolina. But Steve Wilkes doing a nice job. Why wouldn't you hire Steve Wilkes? I don't know. Let's look at it. If you cut Russell Wilson, you got $107 million in dead cap space. $82 million in a money charge if you trade him. Now, here's the Colts deal. The Colts deal took a guy, Matt Ryan, that Atlanta was happy to get rid of and pay for. They took a guy based on a 1-hour evaluation. Oh, he's our guy. They took him because he's the guy. So let me ask you a question. You're sitting there with a very young roster, 20 guys on IR with the Denver Broncos. Jerry Jeudy might be enough for me to keep. There's young talent there. Let's go over to the – but you got a Russell Wilson problem. You got a severe Russell Wilson problem. And don't tell me about, draft capital. I don't hear about draft capital. Denver has some draft capital. Colts have some draft capital, but neither have used it very well. Although I would argue Denver at least has some talented wideouts, and I mentioned Jeudy. But let's go, which is a better operation? Which would you take? Which would you take? Colts, if you watched them last night, they stink. Every time the Colts are on national TV, they stink. Denver was on national TV and gave up 51 to who? To who? Joe Montana? Kenny Stabler? Tom Brady? No. Baker Mayfield gave up 51. So the coach had to go. Colts embarrassed himself last night, but defensively the Colts are good. So which would you take? Colts have a good defense. If I come in as a Colts coach, I'm keeping Gus Bradley. You got over here at least a quarterback that can never be as bad as he's been. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Russell Wilson. He can't be this bad again. Now, with the Colts, you don't have a coach. Of course, here you don't have a coach. Colts, you don't have an offensive coordinator. Over here, it doesn't really matter because they're firing anyone anyway. Over here with the Colts, you don't have any wideouts. Aren't wideouts important? But over here with the Colts, guess what you got? You got Jonathan Taylor, although he's hurt. So you got a defense, Jonathan Taylor, no quarterback, no left tackle, no stud wideouts, no dynamic playmakers. Over here, you got a quarterback problem in Denver that is owed more money than God for the next 4 years, which hamstrings you a little bit. But you do have, ladies and gentlemen, you do have talented wide receivers and some weapons. Now, the defense is just okay, but they just gave up 51. I know there was a pick 6 or 2 in there. I get it. But the roster is fairly young and talented. So which do you want? Now, ownership. Hey, look, I don't know about ownership. Hell, Condoleezza Rice was added to ownership of the Broncos. Over here, you got Jimmy Irsay, who's going to be by his plane, telling you all chips are in. Over here, you got John Elway, that, of course, in his own city, even though he's won a Super Bowl, everybody thinks stinks. Over here, you got Chris Ballard, who, even though he has never even won a division, I want to say that again, never even won a division, 46, 52, and 1, is considered by some a masterful general manager. I want you to think about that, please. I'm going to go through that again for you. 46, 52, and 1 has never, not one time, won the easiest, worst division in the AFC. Not once. 0. All right. Over here, you at least showed that the guy running it can win a Super Bowl. Me personally, I'm going to Denver. Me personally, I'm going to do what most people do. I can fix Russell Wilson. Who am I fixing over here? There's your quarterbacks for the Colts. Look at that list. Ever since Peyton Manning was let go by Jimmy Irsay, which I said was a bad move, Ryan Grigson drafted the best draft class ever in terms of yardage. It included a guy named Vic Ballard, who you've never heard of, who was terrific until he got hurt, T.Y. Hilton, and, of course, Andrew Luck. But this is the list of quarterbacks. Now, here's the deal. You got to understand something. In Indy, the general manager says it's not about one guy. Of course it's about one guy. If you went from Luck and eliminated 3/4 of the guys under Luck on that shirt, Hasselbeck, Freeman, Tolzien, Brissett, Hoy, blah, blah, because Luck stayed and Luck was healthy, this would be a different franchise. There's no question about it. But Luck did not like the way the Colts were coached. Luck's family did not like the way the Colts were coached. Now there are reports that the Colts and the general manager have frayed relationships. Of course, players don't like soft. Softness, kindness equals weakness to players. I reported this way back. Andrew Luck, I was right with his dad in London, listening to his dad complain to whoever he was on the phone. Yes, I was eavesdropping about what a piece of blank organization this is. Under Chuck Pagano, they got him holding on to the football too long, blah, 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 blah. And then Grigson leaves, all the toughness leaves. Anyway, softness does not rule. And in the NFL in particular, guys know they got to be challenged. Guys know they got to be tough. All right? I wouldn't go to the Colts because that's the culture. That's the freaking culture. Soft, relationship-based, social media interested, Frank Reich kneeling, to show his solid, all this crap, which is fine. Be a social justice warrior, but you got to win football games and you got to have a culture of toughness. I'm going to give you a couple things with the Colts. And then I'm going to give you a couple things with the Broncos. The Broncos, let's go first. At least the Broncos have won a Super Bowl. Now, how'd they do it? They did it with championship defense. They did it with a quarterback on his last leg. They did it with a running game. But you know what they did? They did it because they had an internal structure. Let me ask you this. What other teams really have a culture? We've talked about this on the show. If I were to ask you, do the Bengals have a culture? I might say no, but they got a hell of a quarterback. If I were to ask you, do the Steelers have a culture? I'd say yes. There was no way the Steelers were losing that 50th anniversary game. No chance. Zero shot. None. So long story short, I gave you people a number of things. The Broncos have a guy that looks like he can win a Super Bowl, and he has. The Colts have a general manager that, all right, hang on. The Luck family didn't like because he was too soft. Nelson, the guard, Quentin Nelson, MF, the general manager, on the field, during practice. Get me better players to play against. They thought it was a good thing. the guard, Nelson, had to go up to Frank Reich and tell him to use Jonathan Taylor, and the Colts thought that was a good thing. That ain't a good thing. There's nothing good about that. And I told you, soft-ass relationship-based coaching is seen as weakness. Lee, am I right? Yes. So I'm going to the Broncos, bottom line. I'm going to the Broncos. I'm taking my chances with Russell Wilson. We already paid a bunch, and away we go. That's what I'm doing. Tom Crean came into Indiana, straightened it out. Marquette, straightened it out. Georgia, straightened it out. See, what happens is this in coaching. A tough coach comes in, everybody complains. But then everybody gets straightened out. You get your right guys in there if you're given enough time, and then you go about the business. But a soft-ass culture that starts out soft, it's really tough to toughen up. It's really easy to soften up. Conference basketball is starting, and we're going to get into this. Tom Crean, you know him. You love him. You see him on ESPN, Marquette, Indiana, Georgia, ESPN. At Georgia, Tom, let me ask you a question. Football, and you've been around this your whole life. For those of you that don't know, John Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh, Tom's brothers-in-law, very close family. One, obviously, is the head coach at Michigan, getting ready to play for a national championship. The other has won a Super Bowl and probably will win more in John Harbaugh. And then you were at Georgia with Kirby Smart and all that. Let me ask you a simple question. When you observe big-time football operations, is it more business-based or is it more relationship-based, or is that the ever evolving struggle to mix the two?
I think you have to have the relationship with the coaches, and fortunately, where I've been, I always have. And even going back to Michigan State, when I was there with Tom Izzo, we had it with Nick Saban. We worked great with their staffs, and I think the relationship part is important, but I don't think it's even close to the administration's view of the business side of it. And so it's really two separate things. And at the end of the day, when you're in a major college football program and it generates the money television-wise that it does, revenue streams, all those different things, those decisions are based on business. Now, Kirby, and the way he runs it, I think he's very relationship-oriented with the way that he recruits. I think he is that way with his players. I don't think Jim gets nearly enough credit for the relationships that he has with his players. And it's enormous. I mean, and being up close around both of those situations, it's really, really strong. But at the end of the day, in those type of programs, it's going to come down to what is absolutely best for football, especially at Georgia. And I get that because of what it just generates revenue-wise.
It's funny from a coaching perspective. When I was at Bowling Green and Urban was there, we were neighbors. We always had our players over the house. He would have dunk contests at his house with his players. We always, and I remember when Urban went back to Ohio State, he said, the one thing I've learned is, man, oh man, this thing has really turned into a business, even with your own team. Now, you got to know, players got to know the coaches, and you have so many position coaches in football. Basketball, you have so few players, that kind of thing. When you look at a guy like Jim, your brother-in-law, Jim Harbaugh, and you say he doesn't get, what does he do to facilitate the relationship? Like I just mentioned, having players at the house, things like that. What do guys do now in modern football or basketball?
Well, I think they still connect one-on-one. I think they do a really good job of talking to their position coaches. I know Jim does in this situation, of talking to his coaches, getting a feel for what's going on with each group, quote unquote, what's going on in each room. And I think he does a really good job of managing by wandering around. I really do. I think I think you have to really work at that in coaching. I mean, could you imagine being a college basketball coach and having someone go through the director of operations to get a meeting with you, one of your players? Could you imagine that?
No.
Me neither. And that happens, right? I mean, that's happening in college basketball. Now, football-wise, I could see that to a degree because it's so big. College basketball-wise, I can't see that But that's where you don't need to turn it into a business. It's got to be relationship based. But I do think Jim is really, really good at messaging his team and messaging individual players. I really do, whether it's through texting, whether it's through a FaceTime, whether it's through having them in the office, whether it's through finding them where they're at, near the locker room, down by the equipment room. Jim's got a lot of spots at Michigan where he can get to the players and it doesn't seem like a meeting. Like Andy Reid, my brother-in-law John said, was the master at having a meeting without a meeting. Right? He could get what he wanted and talk to the person that he wanted to, and it never feel like it was a meeting. And I think both John and Jim are both really good at that. And I think that's something we all want to try to be better at as coaches. Don't put them on the defensive right away. Get them to be in an environment where they're comfortable talking. And I think Jim's done a really, really good job of that at Michigan, especially over the last couple of years with this team.
That's an art, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Because it's got to be, you know how it is as a head coach. I mean, you're either going to be the first to know or the last to know. There's some true statements in coaching that are non-negotiable. That's one of them, right? You're not going to know a lot of times, but then sometimes you're going to absolutely be the first to know. Then you've got to decide how you're going to handle that with everybody else. But I think in that situation, you're rarely going to find out, unless you search for it, what's really going on with somebody. I think there's a real art to going deep with a player, and you've got to spend the time at it. And when you're a head coach, especially at a major place like a Georgia, like a Michigan, you got to work harder at it, because there's so many different ways that you can get isolated and layered in that program if you want to. And there's so many people that you got to go around or through to get to the head coach. And I think the head coach has got to break down those barriers. And I think Jim does that.
Last thing on this, and you probably have the best perspective other than the actual, other than Jim. Was there ever a time going back, and I remember commenting on it saying how stupid it would be if they did it. Was there ever a time that Jim Harbaugh thought he was going to be let go at Michigan?
I think so. Yeah.
Do you?
But it was definitely on his mind. I mean, I would say that. I don't think there's any question about that. I mean, the end of 3 years ago, that was not a good situation. I mean, that was not and you know how it is, communication and all those and I wasn't there, obviously, but I'm just piecing a lot of this together just from being in the family. Things go downhill, right? The communication, you see less people around and those type of things. But I thought Jim did a great job when all that went on of keeping level-headed, continue to understand where they were at, and really wanting to be the head coach at Michigan. I mean, he really wanted to be there. And I think that's why you saw the situation come out with the salary cut the way that it was. But no, I think Jim's a confident guy, but he's also a realist. And I think at the end of the day, there's no question that was a concern.
You make a great point. Confident guy, but realist.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you can be confident as heck and know the situation isn't good. And you know this, and I know this. In coaching, one of the great things that I think, now I'm on the outside, you can correct me, Jim Harbaugh did, was change the momentum of his program. Momentum is so hard. Once you lose momentum, it is so hard to get it back. And he was on a negative momentum, even though he was winning a lot. But boy, did he flip that in a positive direction. That is a true lesson for a lot of coaches. They ought to study whatever Jim did.
Well, he's not. Yeah, exactly. And because a lot of times people don't want to give you momentum back. They don't want to let you get it. I mean, we lost to Syracuse and we're number one in the country. I guarantee there were people we never got back. Right. I mean, it's part of it. But in Jim's case, Jim is the same guy that at Stanford one year changed this whole defensive staff, and they were winning. He walked into a situation where I think they had 5 wins in 3 years. So basically he walks into Stanford and he's recruiting to Stanford's academics and being Jim Harbaugh, right? And look at what happened with the program. I mean, and where they took it. So he's never been afraid to make big decisions. He's definitely a loyal guy, but like when it comes to big picture, he's got that. I think the greatest of coaches have got that ability to stay in the details of the day, but never lose sight of what the big picture vision is. And they're the ones that create the vision. They don't let the outside expectations or somebody set it for them. They created. So I think when Jim made the decisions that he made, especially in the strength area, I think that changed for him. I think the process of what's changed at Michigan is a lot more simple than what people would think it is. I think it became that there's a creativity to every day there, whether it's what they're doing offensively, defensively, what they're doing in the weight room, how they're motivating people, how they're driving people. I mean, I've heard different stories of things they come up with in the weight room in the summertime that, like, man, I've never heard of that. But you know what? It inspires those guys. I think Jim taking his team, the trips overseas were phenomenal life lessons, right? But I think one of the smartest things Jim did was take 7-8 days this past summer and go to Flint, Michigan, and go to a Boys and Girls Club and go to the jail there and take his kids into the jail, to go to Grand Haven, to go to Lansing, to the state capitol, go up north and just keep his team together. Right. And there were agendas and there were plans. OK. And there was an itinerary, but a lot of times it was just them. And if you learn anything from the former players, you learn this: they miss the bus rides and the time that nobody else sees when they move on to the next level as much as they miss anything else. And I've had numerous guys come back and talk about that. And when you get back with your teams, they're telling stories that only they knew, but you were there because you were in the front of the bus and they were in the back of the bus, right? It's just, that's reality. I think that's the simplicity of it. And I think that's where Jim, no matter what he went through mentally 3 years ago, he never lost focus on what he wanted Michigan to be, going through the COVID situation. And he learned then you don't get any credit for guys that get injured. You don't get any credit for guys that skip out on the season. You don't get any credit for that. Nobody cares, right? So you just keep moving forward with what you think is best, and I think he's done that.
Oh, man, I've always said a couple of the best coaching I've ever seen. You at Indiana, Beeline at West Virginia, and the way Jim flipped that deal is it's just not as easy. I mean, I know I get the simplistic part that you're saying. But you're right. It's not that easy because you do lose people and sometimes you lose your team. Before I let you go, I want to get into, I'm watching the Big Ten, Coach, and I got to tell you, they keep losing big games. And Boeheim opened my eyes. Boeheim, when he said earlier in the year, like, look, hey, Big Ten stunk last year in the tournament. I'm starting thinking, all right, I'm a Big Ten guy. I've always promoted the Big Ten, but you got to beat good teams. Who do you like? From the Big Ten, Purdue's carrying the mantle, but who do you like?
Oh, I like Purdue. I think the true test of Purdue is going to be what's going to happen when they lose 2 in a row, because that's going to happen, right? I mean, and I think a lot of it is going to be when they go to Ohio State and Penn State, in the 5th and the 8th of January, how they respond to that. I think they can get a lot better, though. I mean, I really do, and I think they are getting better. I mean, Zach Edey's numbers continue to skyrocket over time. Now, can he take 8 free throws a game and move it to 10? And can Mason Gillis, who's a 90% free throw shooter, get fouled? Can the 4 and 5 men on that team average somewhere, with Zach Edey included, obviously, around 13 to 14 free throws? Can the guards coming off the bench like Newman continue to play at a high level? Here's the one that we never talk about, and he's had a really good college career, is David Jenkins. I mean, he's shooting 21% from 3. I mean, at some point, that's got to change. And I know he's not playing as many minutes as he's played in other places, but they've got a deep team. I think they've got a team that can withstand some issues. I think Michigan State will get better as Malik Hall gets healthy. Said this the other night when I was with Seth at ESPN that I think they go as A.J. Hoggard goes. And I think, how he plays is going to be really, really important for that team. I love Ohio State because I think they're going to get better. They've got a really good blend of young with Bruce Thornton, who's just a pure winner, who knows how to play, with the improvement of Zed Key, with Bryce Sensabaugh, who's like I can't believe how well that kid's shooting the basketball from range. And I mean, they've got bodies that are really, really hard to win with, to beat, and can withstand a lot of issues during the season. So I would have said Illinois, but I mean, it's got to get fixed there. Whatever it is, there's got to be more of a connection. Sky Clark has got to play like a point guard and deliver the ball. And they've just got to get connected. It hasn't looked like that the last couple of games. But I like all those teams. And I think Indiana, the key for Indiana now, it's not Trace Jackson Davis is who he is. I think there's 2 keys for them. Can Race Thompson change the spacing of that team so that you cannot collapse inside constantly, okay, when the two bigs are in, and can Trey Galloway really provide stability at that point guard along with Jalen Hood-Schifino? Because like there's a difference between Purdue and Indiana in this. When Purdue kicks it out of a double team, they're going to make another pass and then maybe another pass. When Indiana kicks it out of a double team, they usually shoot that ball. And I think what you lose with that, you might make the shot, but what you lose is the ability to break down the defense, the ability to get a long closeout, the ability to get it back inside. So like in Purdue's case, they find a way to get it back to Zach Edey many, many times after they kick it out because the double team is coming 95% of the time. And they have that ability to get him in the middle of the floor, which is basically unguardable. But when they get that kind of movement, it creates cutting, it creates offensive rebounding opportunities, it creates long closeouts with that, which then kind of creates a chance for a kid like Edey to get a one-on-one. So I think who improves during the season is going to be a big thing. And the upside to me are those teams that I mentioned.
But let me ask you, all right, so I'm watching Indiana, and I think Indiana's got what Indiana needs. They've got experience, a ton of experience. They got a big guy, they got guys, they got all these, guys. And then when you watch them play Arizona or you watch them, go to Kansas, it's not close. And then I watch Illinois. You mentioned Illinois, and then I watch them play. And, Missouri crushes them. And then I watch Ohio State. They get beat late against – to me, and I don't know that this really matters right now. I understand a tournament run is a tournament run. But at some point, when you're a league like Indiana and you've got on a national level, Tom, you got to win some of these games. Like you lost the ACC Big Ten tournament. Now, is it fatal? No. But to be, again, Boeheim changed my view of this. Like, hey, look, you got to start beating national teams. Your best teams got – produce that team.
Sure.
Like I look at Kentucky and I say Kentucky isn't – when you played Kentucky, it was stupid, right? The guys that they have. Now Kentucky's just – I don't know. They don't look any different to me. Arkansas looks good.
Well, it's the speed, Dan. I think it's the speed. I think like even in the Indiana, Arizona, Indiana, Kansas game, it was the break and it was the points off the running on the turnover.
Yes.
And when you're really big, we had to work and Cody Zeller was one of the fastest bigs. He's probably as fast and big as I've ever coached, right? And that year that he and Anthony Davis were in college together, those two were two special running bigs, right? Well, like Tubelis is like that now at Arizona. And the teams that keep coming at you time and time again, like Arizona and Kansas are, a lot of times you have to really, really work to prepare for that. Like you've got to do a lot of change of end drills, the 5-on-5 change, all the things that you did in transition. Like you've got to really work on not winding up when you run. Like you got to turn, plant, pivot, go. Like those are arts. And I think when you've got bigger teams, you got to spend that much more time because you're going to spend the game in transition against the best teams, okay? Because they can beat you in the half court, but they know how to run on your turnovers. They know how to run off the miss. And the best of the best know how to run on the make, and they know how to advance the ball. Like when Kentucky's throwing the ball ahead, when Severe Wheeler's throwing the ball ahead, they're pretty good. When they're just dribbling the ball up and getting into an offense, they're a lot easier to guard because they don't – JoJo Toppin's shooting 15% from three. So you can guard them easier in the half court. And I think that's one of the differences in the Big Ten. Frankly, I think that'll be a big thing for Purdue because – you want to get Edey in a transition game, but what's amazing thus far is the conditioning that they have him in. And again, he's playing so much more minutes. I think he played 11 minutes as a freshman. Now he's like 32. When you look at the difference, even when they had Williams together with him, they ran well in transition. But like that's going to be the key for a lot of these teams. Not only not turning it over, but being able to stop the other team's break from getting layups and dunks after your turnovers, I think. Does that make sense?
I always said this about Michigan State, and this is something that is ingrained in them. They score when they're good. They score every way you can. And let me go through that. You mentioned transition. They're the fastest team in the Big Ten historically since Tom's been there. All right. Then if they don't have that, then they get into a pretty good set. And the sets, he's like Roy Williams. The sets are the same from 1975 as they are now. It's the same. It's Roy always did it. All right, you want to get a free throw. They work on a free throw block out. Side out of – I always said this, and I think Michigan State, and that's why they've been the most successful team by far in the tournament, is because they've always done that. And I look at other teams, and you mentioned Arizona and Kansas, and to a certain degree, I think I kind of fell in love with Arkansas getting down the floor.
Sure, absolutely. Alabama does. Yeah.
Alabama. Those teams have kind of adapted. I'm not going to say Michigan State's way, but for the Big Ten people, how Michigan State played. Let's go. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. Our best teams at Indiana were like that,
Yes.
and those were also our best 3-point shooting teams because we got the ball into a drive and kick situation. We threw the ball ahead. And like Michigan State right now is a great example. You said two of those parts. And what they're missing right now is the offensive rebounding, and they're missing the free throws, right? And those two go hand in hand because it's the team that gets the layups. And it's the team that gets to the foul line, that gets to the basket. And when you're putting, Michigan State has been so good for so long because they put pressure on the rim every possession.
Yes.
That rim pressure might be a three, but more often than not, that rim pressure is you've got to get back and get covered. And they always have a threat to throw it inside. We early on when Cody was a freshman for us, we could throw the ball inside. As his skills advanced, now he could catch the ball 15 feet, 17 feet away from the rim on the break and make a play off the driver, make a pass to somebody. Your break evolves. I've always said I was never a motion offensive coach like you were, but I've always said our motion offense is the fast break because the motion offense, the best motion offenses can't be scouted, correct? I mean, you can't scout them, right?
Yeah,
I've never really taught it, but I know you can't scout it. It's the same thing with your break. When you can't scout your break, you're in a really, really good position. And I think that's the key. I mean, you've got to be able to not only run that break, you've got to be able to bring fatigue to the other team so you can run your half-court offense better. And then you get the slips, the cuts, the offensive rebounds, all those type of things because people wear down because they've had to chase the ball all game.
And again, I feel like I don't want to talk. You were on a couple weeks ago, and I feel like I'm talking about the same thing, but it's fascinating. Like, to me, that's one of the disappointing things with Indiana. Tell me if this is accurate, because I've said this. I always thought going back, now I haven't coached for a while, but college coaches felt like NBA guys ran great stuff. So, great sets. And, you got to run them quick, too, because you only have 24 seconds. Now I'm looking at guys, and Woody's one of them, and Juwan, and I'm watching guys that came from the NBA in the Big Ten, and I don't see it. Like I don't see the things that we used to see, and maybe the NBA has changed as well. But Tom, I always thought, man, I'm going to study whoever because I just saw 6 great sets that we could put in that are fast. You know what I'm talking about?
Sure. Hubie Brown said something to me probably back. It might have been 2012 or 13. He said he always wanted to have 3 shooters on the floor no matter what. And he said, when you can get 4, he said, you're going to be ahead of the game. And I always remembered that. And I think the reason I say that is because I think what happens is, look at Michigan sets look great when they had Franz Wagner in there, right? I mean, it's just, he could do so many different things. Look what he's doing in the NBA. I think the pro teams have unique force, right? Whether they're hybrid 4s, whether they're gazelles, whether they're, you can play high-low with those guys. You can play 3 out, 2 in. But it's much harder in college to succeed at 3 out, 2 in if you're going to beat good teams because of the break. Now, you can beat good teams if they'll let you play in the half court, but you're not. And then you have to defend all those hybrid shooting 4s, right? So that's why I said I think the number one key to me for Indiana from what I've seen, and I've only seen a few of the games, but I've seen the games you mentioned. I was in the studio the other night when they were playing my former assistant, Amir Abdur-Rahim at Kennesaw, who did a great job against them.
He did.
But Race Thompson making the 3s against Arizona, where they were between me and you, okay, from guarding him because they were going to let him shoot those balls. And he made 4 of them, I think, right? Like he's going to be an absolute key. They may not have 4 shooters on the floor all the time. They may not have 3. Well, how do you get it? You get better shooting because you get drive and kick. You get driving kick from the long closeout, and you got a spacing 4 that creates something different in the game. And then I think what that does is that's going to help Indiana get more offensive rebounds, more putbacks, and not just be, again, I think so much of it is they make that one kick, and if it goes in, great. But if it doesn't go in, a lot of times it's a corner 3, and the old adage that was there long before either one of us started coaching, a corner 3 is a fast break waiting to happen, right? I mean, and I know it's the preeminent shot in the NBA, but in college, a lot of times that's a tough shot, right? And then what it does is it just creates that speed. It's like you eliminate the outlet because of the long rebound on the other side. I mean, and you're gone in so many situations. So I hope Indiana can get that. I hope Race Thompson, the Xavier Johnson thing hurts him defensively, but I think Trey Galloway, I don't know the young guy, but I think he can be a guy that can facilitate their offense. He looks to be very heady and tries to move the ball to other people. Plus he can make shots. So like if you don't guard him up there, I think those two guys are going to be absolute keys to what they do.
Last thing before I let you go. Ohio State, Georgia. I got to believe you're taking Michigan over Texas Christian. Ohio State, Georgia. What are you thinking?
I think Georgia. Yeah, I think Georgia. I think C.J. Stroud is a great player that Jim did a really good job with them, actually both years. But being around Georgia, it's layer upon layer. You know the old adage, next man up. Like we lose OG Anunoby. Well, Juwan Morgan got hurt. He ran into a referee in the Rutgers game. The referee was in the wrong spot. They collide in the Rutgers game at home. Juwan Morgan's ankle's never the same. My last year at Indiana. I mean, never the same. So there's no such thing as next man up if the next man's not as good as that man.
Right.
You lost, right? Well, Georgia doesn't have that issue. Georgia can go layers into that program, and they may not be quite as good as the first round pick that's starting or the second round pick, but they're pretty close to as good. And I think that's the difference in Georgia is not just their skill and not just their offensive and defensive line. They're extremely well coached. Todd Monken is an incredibly good offensive coordinator. Kirby's got his pulse on the whole deal. But, man, they go to second and third string, and they're still fine. And I think and that's why they can put so many personnel groupings out there.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I always tell people at Bowling Green, I lost my best two players 7 of my 10 years. And during the year, people are like, man, you're coaching your brains out. But you know what happens at the end of the year, right? Your record is your record. That's just, that's just coaching.
I wish, as you know as well as I do, it takes a special administration to care about injuries. It really does. And it does. I mean, it is. And there's some that do. I'm not saying there are some that aren't. But I've been with a few that don't. And it's just not. I mean, my last year at Georgia, we lose our 2 starting forwards, one before the season starts, one 6-7 games into the season. I'm like, those things are real. I mean, they're real when you lose good players. And you look back at it and you want to feel better as a coach. Like we lost OG Anunoby for 18 games. When he got hurt, he was going in the lottery. If they redrafted, he'd have been one of the first picks in the draft, But the bottom line is you lose them and people just don't care. You hope the fans care some. But administrations, a lot of time, they don't really care.
No, I would hear, oh, man, I can't believe what a great job you do. Oh, okay, great. You know what I mean? And then. Yeah,
it's.
But Georgia has that covered.
I think they do, yeah.
Yeah, last thing. I think it's fascinating. Like, last thing, because I'm not going to talk to you before. I don't know how you were about game day. I hated game day. I was like Bear Bryant always said, look, all I do is sit around and fret and figure out ways not to lose. I got to believe, particularly for Ryan Day, if it's Ohio State, Michigan national championship, even though it's a national championship, that game day is miserable.
Game day for me started 2 days early, in the mornings, yeah. Right? Now, I get better during the day. I never got better during game day. I mean, it was it's like a 48-hour day. You wake up and the game is, 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours. I hated noon games because I hated that early time with your team. But at the end of the day, man, it was so much better. I mean, that's why I think Jim loves noon games, right? They've had so many 70-80% of their games have been noon games this season. And then you've got the rest of the day. But it'll be interesting. It'll be, Ohio State's got Kevin now that's gone to Tulsa. So he's coaching with Ohio State and building his program at Tulsa. There's, the fortunate thing for Jim is he hasn't lost any coaches off that staff. So they've been able to stay locked in to the recruiting. I mean, they're doing a great job in the portal and they're getting their team ready. You're right. I mean, I don't know Ryan Day and I certainly don't know his stomach, but I've been there as we've all been. And I would think that Jim does everything he can do to get a good night's sleep the night before the game. And I still think he struggles. And it's a tough deal. But once that game kicks, you're great, but it's not until either. To me, it was never until tip. Even the national anthem was miserable.
Oh. I remember going, hey, one of the great things about Indiana is that the band plays, if they don't sing, the band goes quick. I learned this. Ohio State, the band goes quick. Let's go. I don't need somebody drawing out the freaking. Hey, man, thanks for you.
Iowa had the advantage. As you know, playing at Iowa, they had that build-up music with the band. So, you get pumped up, but it seemed like they were doing an encore at a 3 encore performance concert somewhere. It was so long, but it was great, right? And the crowd was wrecked. Hey, game management, it's X's and O's, recruiting, and game operations. Those 3 have some equal value. All 3 have equal value in building a program.
There's a lot of truth to that. Hey, boss, have a great New Year. Merry Christmas to your family, my friend. Thank you for the time. Anytime, Dan. Thank you. Oh, that was awesome. We got to put that out. You coaches out there, you just need to listen to Coach Crean, man. I mean, that was fantastic stuff. It's good to get a little hoops in here, but I'm telling you, I'm a college football fan, and I cannot wait to see what happens this week. And we're going to continue recapping the NFL. Jonathan Hutton is going to join us. I got my 5 most full of you-know-what politicians, and I'm going to equate them to coaches as we come back. But the NFL, interesting stuff going on. What's Putin doing? Putin is saying what now? I got a lot to get into with that as well. We'll be right back.
Yeah, I think because things, transitioned from that regime side to that fundamentalist side. So we also had to change some of our tactics and our procedures and everything else and how we did things to cope with these guys, because they were coming up with some ingenious ways of doing things along the line as well, with some of the IEDs, some of the the booby trapping the houses, things like that, using the cell phones to call, to detonate everything. So it became, I think, as much as you say, more violent in that way, because with the regime guys too, we knew that there was the end state was trying to get Saddam, so that we needed intel as well. We needed to gather that intelligence. There was only so much that was there from previous, just historical data. Then we had to actually make it real intel and workable intel. But with the fundamentalists, if you gave them a chance to vote, and we'd say vote based off, okay, does this guy want to is he going to go along with the capture, or is he wanting to fight? And then let's see who wins. They would rather fight than do anything. There was, so many times guys would detonate suicide vests, because it's like, well, they're not going to take me, clack themselves off, thinking they're killing, other folks around them. But they just, I don't know, they just were different folks. And it was like we had to get more violent in a way, because again, we were going after intel and doing things, and our procedures and everything on the battlefield just had to kind of adjust, just like they were doing.
That's crazy. I truly cannot imagine. And I was in college. I started college in 2010. So I was in high school when things were getting kind of real bad in the 06, 07 era. And I remember people would always talk about do we really need to be fighting these guys? Are they really that bad? And I'm like, this Zarqawi guy's literally chopping people's heads off, right? And don't think it stops there. Like, if this guy could, he'd chop all of our heads off too. Fortunately, they dropped a couple bombs on him, I believe, if I recall correctly. So now I want to get into some comparing and contrasting.
Would argue that that's as good a basketball conversation as you're going to hear, or actually that's as good a coaching conversation as you're going to hear with Tom Crean. Look, that's why I've always said I don't want to hear children. Like, I don't want to hear Rex Chapman and Seth Davis and Candace Parker. I don't want to hear them at halftime, or all the little kids, the Cornettes and Dylan Cuffs or whatever they're, Christmas, all these guys. When you get coaches talking together about basketball or about football. Like, I'm going to try to get Urban on later on this week so we can preview the national championship scene. It's just a deeper, better conversation. But, I know that people go, well, you got so. No. We need deeper, better conversations. That's what this show is. All right, let me discuss a few things going on in the world. I just saw this. This is sad. My Indianapolis Colts, ladies and gentlemen, people came, and I should have sent this to you guys. I didn't. I apologize. People came with bags on their heads. That's right. We got head bagged Colts guy. I don't like it. I don't like it even a little bit. Head bagged Colts guy is not a good thing. If they are putting a bag on their head in your city because of embarrassment, that is not great. That is not what you want. No. Head bagged Colts guy or head bagged your guy sucks. Don't do it. Don't. No. We don't like it. Anyway, I digress. And you know what? Last night, the Colts deserved head bag Colts guy. We're going to talk about the firing of Nathaniel Hackett. But, man, I don't know if you guys saw this, but winter storms are causing havoc. And I hope all of you out there are, man, we're down here in Naples, and it's cold, but we're not traveling. I got to tell you, 17,000 U.S. flights were canceled. Some airlines like JetBlue offered attendants triple pay due to staffing shortages. You got to see some of the video of this. People are losing their minds a little bit. Let's see it.
We do not have crew to work the flights. Once again, travel to one passengers. 90% of our flights have been canceled. We cannot remove you here at the airport. We do not have seats. We cannot leave our meetings for like 4 days.
Man, I'm telling you, I hope that you all, Southwest Airlines, I don't know the deal with Southwest Airlines, but Southwest Airlines has let all of you down. Now, I'm just telling you, they've let everybody down. According to Clay, 2/3 of all flights are now canceled for today and tomorrow. He says in a snarky way, it's gotten even so bad that Mayor Pete's team has even noticed, Pete Buttigieg. Here it is. USDOT, Department of Transportation, is concerned by Southwest's unacceptable rate of cancellations and delays and reports of lack of proper customer service. Really? All right. The department will examine whether cancellations were controllable and if Southwest is complying with its customer service plan. So Mayor Pete not happy. Hell, Mayor Pete just get in the jet and go. If you want Mayor Pete to be president, you're an idiot. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. But Mayor Pete is not happy. Mayor Pete in the Department of Transportation, well, guess what? He's saying, hey, we got to figure this out. We got to get to the bottom of Southwest Airlines. In my lifetime, that's the first time I've ever seen anything like that. I feel like I should give you a war update. Ukraine and the United States are, I don't know, allies together. Yet the United States gives over the merchant of death to Russia, and Zelensky comes here and makes a big spectacle, and all the idiots in Congress are waving flags of a dictator that is as corrupt as any in Zelensky. But hey, we don't seem to care. All right, so this is Putin. Now, this is what happens. You get fighting. PR battle also takes place called propaganda in wars. Putin says Russia is ready to negotiate over Ukraine. Ukrainians are saying, what are you talking about? He said, they're saying, no, you're lying. He says it's the West, it's us that are causing the most problems. All right, let me read this. The invasion started on the 24th, and I did not know this, but this is the most deadly war since World War II, the most deadly European conflict since World War II. I did not know that. I didn't. Putin says we're ready to negotiate with anyone involved with acceptable terms, but that's up to them. We're not the ones refusing to negotiate. They are. Now, I don't know about you, but everything out of all these people's mouths, I don't buy. Of course, Zelensky and his spokesman says Russia single-handedly is attacking the Ukraine and is killing our citizens. Russia doesn't want negotiations. They're trying to avoid responsibility. Now, this is what war really is. You ready? War isn't Nancy Pelosi holding up a flag or you on Twitter saying, I stand with the Ukraine. This is what war is. Russia attacked power plants. Russia attacked electricity sources. So what you have now is the Ukraine in total darkness in many areas, darkness, because they don't have electricity. That's war. You know, war is not, hey, look at me, I support, my pronouns are he, him, they, them, whatever. No, that's not. That's United States war. And another reason why we are so lucky, we literally stand on third base and think we had a triple here in the United States. I mean, let's be honest, we do. You know, you think about what happens all across the country. What's my biggest worry? It's 45, not 75 here in Naples. I mean, what are we doing? And most people, it's like that. For most people in and around the United States, those that chose the right path, I mean, and decided to go to work or whatever that job is, I mean, our biggest concerns are nothing compared to what's going on across the Middle East, certainly across the Ukraine and Russia and everywhere else. That's what's real. I mean, this crap where Zelensky comes and he gives a speech and we're going to wave a flag and we're going to act, stop. Just stop. Stop. It's stupid. Stuff we worry about is minuscule. Stuff we worry about is inconsequential. We're worried about he, him, they, them. You're not saying my pronoun right. Shut up. There's a war going on. People are without electricity. Well, I don't care. You're a phobic. Yeah, okay. There's a war going on. People are dying. I don't care. You said my transgender name wrong. I don't care. You didn't say LBGTQ. No, I don't care. No. There's wars going on. People are starving. Murders in our street. That's what I care about. Don't at me with it. Just don't at me. I got to go back to this. New York City, a store owner said, not on my watch. We're going to come back. Jonathan Hutton is going to join us. But let's go to break with this beautiful human being not letting people shoplift. We need more of this. We need the tackle squad from Best Buy. We celebrate when people stand up to criminals. We'll be right back. Let's play the video. Jonathan Hutton next.
Go pay, Aune to go. Go pay. Go pay, Aune to go. Go pay. Please, go pay. Go pay. Go get those items. You promise. Go pay all items. That's it. Go. No. I'm not going to do it. Okay, so you wasting your time. Okay, to get your stuff. You wasting your time. Can I just go pay?
Sigue robando golpe a todo.
Go. You have to pay. Go. Never come back. That's all I need.
You can take a picture now.
I'm taking.
Don't let him out.
Welcome into the holiday edition of the Trey Wallace podcast. Happy to be joined today by SEC Mike. You guys know who he is. Michael Bratton joins us on the show. Mike, what's up, buddy? How are you?
Hey, Trey. It's always a treat having you on my show, that SEC podcast. So, hey, it's an honor to do your show.
Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on, and it's the holiday season. We've got bowl games going on. We got the transfer portal going on, signing day stuff going on. It's chaotic. It's never a day off in college football, as you know. So let's start in the transfer portal, Michael, where we have seen, I think I saw a number that there were around 1,500 players in the transfer portal as we are having this conversation right now. And I would love to know your thoughts on how you think this has played out since the first day it opened, and then realizing we have got until January 19th, if I'm not mistaken, until this thing closes. What's your early thoughts on how this has played out?
Well, I mean, it's nothing short of amazing, to be honest with you, Trey. I keep track of all the players from the SEC that have jumped into the portal, and A&M's got over 20. Arkansas, Auburn, Florida, Alabama, they're close to those figures as well, just below A&M. But man, it's absolutely chaotic. And I don't know if it's a good for the sport. I don't know if it's bad for the sport, but I certainly think that teams like LSU and Ole Miss, I think they've kind of laid a blueprint. If you want to turn over your roster in a single offseason, it can be done. And I bet you Billy Napier, of course, they're kind of doing it now, but I bet Billy Napier kind of wishes he would have taken that tactic as well.
Ah, boy, there it is right there, the Colts head. You don't want that. You don't want that, people. In your city, the one thing you're trying to avoid, Jonathan Hutton, is the old bag over the head. And that's what we got last night in Indy, Jonathan. How are you?
Dan, I'm doing well. It's a bad sign whenever you have the fans in the stands doing that. And I don't blame them, because Jeff Saturday has been exactly what we thought he would be, a disaster. And the Colts are going to be looking for a new head coach after this. At least we suspect they will be.
Let's go through that. Nathaniel Hackett, all right, 15 games. It felt like Nathaniel Hackett from game one, when the crowd had to count down the play call, the shot clock. It felt like he was swimming upstream the entire time. And Russell Wilson, I went through all the numbers with him. He ain't helping much.
Russell Wilson's been awful, but the only thing helping him is his contract.
Right.
Or he'd be out too. Hackett was really bad when the coach mattered most, late in games, clock situation, when to challenge, when not to, when to let your quarterback go for the first down instead of sending your field goal kicker on in Seattle for a 64-yard field goal to try and win the game. Just bad all around from week one until this past weekend when they were boat raced in L.A. The offensive organization was an unmitigated disaster for Denver. And you knew he was going to be a one and done. I'm surprised that they fired him when they did, but it tells you they're trying to get a leg up on whoever's available right now. And through week 16, Dan, the Broncos are last in points per game. They're last in third down percentage. They're last in 20. They're 26th in yards per game. They're getting nothing done with Russell Wilson. And Nathaniel Hackett was coming over after being the offensive coordinator in Jacksonville. He had an offensive background in Buffalo and, of course, in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. And of their 11 losses, 8 of them have been by a score. And several of those losses are connected back to poor decisions by Nathaniel Hackett. Had a great defense, solid field goal kicker, and the offense was just awful. And hey, they've got now the wealthiest ownership in the NFL by a large margin, and there's no salary cap for coaching staffs in the league. I'm very intrigued to see who they go after. A lot of people are pointing to Sean Payton, who's getting his hat back in the ring, but keep in mind, Sean Payton is apparently tied to Vic Fangio, who was just fired a year ago by Denver. Fangio set out a year as a defensive coordinator, head coach, and he's apparently getting back in as well. And if he pairs up with Sean Payton, he's likely not going to Denver in that regard.
Is Payton the golden goose?
He is, yeah, because of the results. And I think you look at the offense, you look at what Drew Brees did when he paired up with Payton, the offensive numbers. He's got a Super Bowl, and I realize that's one, maybe not enough for fans, for Patriots fans or Kansas City fans. But what Payton did offensively, his final year there is a great example where he went through 4 quarterbacks and a terrible decision by the league to make the Saints sit out. Basically, they forfeited a game because they had to play backups due to the COVID protocol. They were the last team affected by it. And they needed one more win to get in, and they were screwed over at the end of the season. He went through 4 quarterbacks last year and would have been in, I believe, if not for the COVID protocol. So, yeah, his value is way up there. The only thing you can argue against him, I think, is People point to Bountygate and other things. I just point to the fact that he bailed as soon as it got really tough in New Orleans this year. He knew it was going to be bad, and he stepped aside. Sean McVay could have done the same thing, and he's probably regretting it too. And I don't necessarily hold it against Peyton for that, because he wants to get back in, and he's going to a much better situation wherever he ends up. Does he pair with Tom Brady? Are those rumors true? Are those confirmed? Not even rumors. I know that's been confirmed. Does he pair with Brady next year somewhere? What does a team have to give up to get his rights? Because New Orleans still owns the coaching rights of Sean Payton. All of this is one of the top storylines as we begin an off-season in a couple of weeks for the majority of teams in the NFL, and Black Monday starts to happen with coaching firings, because I think there will be several openings.
All right, let me ask you. Carolina, Steve Wilkes doing a pretty good job there. I don't know if they keep him or not. Lovie Smith, let me put it this way. As bad as the Texans' record is, it certainly felt like Lovie Smith wasn't on the same level of Hackett, or wasn't on the same level in terms of being fired as even Reich was, or certainly Saturday was.
Yeah, the difference, though, is, Dan, Houston can have the number 1 overall pick, and they're doing a great job of losing as it is, even though the Titans helped them out. Denver's pick is in Seattle, so they gain nothing by losing. It really doesn't matter where they end up. So I think Houston, no matter if they fire Lovie Smith or not, it's kind of, it's 6 this way, half dozen the other, right? Yeah. Or 12 this way. Here's the other thing. You've got the back-to-back years where I do think they're going to have one-and-done coaches in Houston. I don't think their leadership is anything great from the top down with the Texans, but they are a type of organization that should be able at this point to go all in with a head coach / decision maker and allow that person to frame what is a very talented young roster. They did some really nice things in the draft this past year and over the last 2 years, really. And now they're a quarterback away. They're going to have the number 1 overall pick and a head coach in Lovie Smith, who's likely out. 99% of that, I believe, is he's likely out. And you start looking around going, okay, who's available? And again, Sean Payton's going to be able to pick his place, because I think Arizona comes up. For a while, I thought the Chargers may be available, but the Chargers are going to be in the postseason, and I wouldn't want to play them right now. We mentioned Denver, but there's some other spots that will pop open. Carolina, though, is really intriguing, because they have Steve Wilkes, interim head coach, who's been winning, been a surprise. They got better when they dumped their best players, and he's also a part of the lawsuit with Brian Flores. Keep that in mind. So if Carolina were to go the opposite direction for whatever reason, that's the next, firestorm of the offseason, is whether or not the ownership group in Carolina is racist because they didn't hire Steve Wilkes.
Yeah, there's no question, and that's going to factor into a lot of it. Do you think that factors in Tampa Bay? No, I don't, because Golden Goose, that was handed straight to Todd Bowles. Bruce Arians, in his statement when he stepped down when he did, he was setting up Todd Bowles for an opportunity to be successful in year 1 and win immediately. And if they miss the playoffs this year, with Byron Leftwich coming back, Bruce Arians in the building, but apparently they don't really go to him. If they do, they're not doing that publicly, which allows us to have this conversation about why the offense is so bad. They've had some injuries. The offensive line is atrocious, but I can say that about half the NFL, if not 2/3 of the NFL right now. So, yeah, I mean, if they don't make the playoffs, Bowles is going to – I think Bowles is out, because, again, Brady's out, and they're going to have a new quarterback come in. Byron Leftwich could have been a head coach last year. He's not going to be in the mix this year, I don't believe, based on the results of what we've seen. And there's more turmoil there and confusion than there are solutions and answers, which is a bit surprising. This feels like Brady's final year in New England in 2019, where they went to the wild card round and lost to the Titans, hosting a game. The only difference is that Patriots team was better than this Tampa team, and the Titans are far worse that year than what the Dallas Cowboys are right now. Technically, right now, if the postseason started today, Dallas would be on the road in Tampa Bay, a rematch of Week 1, and I don't think the game is nearly as close as it was in Week 1
Dallas boat races them right now.
I never know what to think of Dallas. Like, I'm watching the other day, and I'm watching Dak Prescott throw for 350 yards. I'm looking, and Gardner Minshew is matching him. I mean, it's a great game. I mean, that was, in my opinion, the game of the weekend. But I never know what to make of Dallas, because next week we could watch a Dallas team that scores 15 points. He throws 2 interceptions. And what the only team that I personally trust, if you're going to say, all right, gun to head, you had one team to pick. Well, let me ask you, you had one team in either division that you would trust to get to the NFC or AFC championship game. Who would that team be?
In the NFC, it's still Philadelphia, because they can beat you in multiple ways. And I mean, it took 4 turnovers for Dallas to beat them with Gardner Minshew. So yeah, I mean, Jalen Hurts is still a great weapon, run and pass this year, but they don't necessarily have to have his best game. He's been really good in big moments, though. Indianapolis comes to mind, where they needed to score in a low scoring game. At the end of the game, Jalen Hurts made the plays necessary. So I trust Philadelphia to show up week in and week out. And hey, on the opposite side, Kansas City didn't turn it over for the first time in 10 weeks, I believe, this past weekend. They turn it over way too much. Buffalo is very up and down, and Josh Allen throws picks. The team I trust the most out of the AFC is Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati has been the sleepwalking team behind the scenes all season for the media and for fans. I think we've overlooked them a bit, forgetting that they won the AFC a year ago. And I think they're about to do the same thing. I think they're about to sneak up on a lot of us who have been like, oh, what's Cincinnati up to in this postseason game? They're beating Buffalo. They're beating Kansas City. They can win in multiple ways, and that's what it takes. And they've got a quarterback that refuses to go down easy. And you can say that about a lot of the AFC quarterbacks, but Burrow is about to blossom again, and the postseason run that he's about to go on, I believe, is going to garner the attention of the national spotlight yet again.
See, the only team that I trust in either division, because the Eagles haven't proven it, Burrow's a great call. In fact, to your point, I really didn't even think about him. I thought about Buffalo and I thought about Kansas City, which makes your point. Mine is Kansas City. It's like, I always think if I were going to bet on one team, just one team to get, I would bet on Kansas City, only because I agree with you. I think the Eagles are the best team. I think Joe Burrow, is the next Joe Montana. I feel like he's that kind of good, but I just don't think about the Bengals. You're right. You're so right.
And the postseason's about moments. Cincinnati had the big moment plays last year throughout their run. The Rams did it. They won 3 consecutive games by 3 points and went to the Super Bowl and won it. So Stafford had those moments a year ago. Burrow did as well. And Burrow has the ability where he's got Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon, that they've got Samaje Perine, who ran it well when Mixon was hurt. Their offensive line has really gelled since the first month of the season. They're so much better up front. And their defense is a tough and stingy group. Not the best group. They're not the 49ers by any means. But they do enough to get the football back in the hands of their top player in Joe Burrow. Again, he can. I saw him here at Nissan Stadium. I've seen him twice in the last calendar year, and that guy cannot be rattled. And there's only a handful of quarterbacks like that, and for the most part, they're all playing in the AFC.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I don't disagree with that even a minute. All right. Moving it towards your city and my city. I know what's wrong in my city. It's a complete collapse. Quarterback play. Just when you didn't think it could get worse, Nick Foles showed up last night and kept throwing it to the other team. What is the bottom line? Is it just injury? Willis's numbers were horrible. Looking forward, if I had to say to you, same thing. Hey, Jonathan, you got to make a bet. Do the Titans make the playoff? Which side of that action would you be on?
No, I don't think they do.
No.
And they're going to a Thursday night game this week against Dallas. It is meaningless because whether win or lose, they have a win and get in AFC South championship on the line in Jacksonville in Week 18. Same for Jacksonville. but they're just not. They don't have it, Dan. The thing is that they are losing games for the most part by 2 to 3 points, and they're averaging about a touchdown less per game than they were a year ago. So really, it comes down to that. And we can point to injuries and many things there, but Derrick Henry has a legitimate chance to win the rushing title this year with 2 games left, and they're 7-8 on the season. And it's not just about injuries, because you can look at the start of games and the way they finish games with different lineups and rosters, because the offense has been averaging about 18 points per game from week 1 to now, even when they were healthy. They have 11 first quarter touchdowns, which is tied for the most in the NFL, the Titans. That's with Buffalo, Cincinnati, and Detroit. And they had one this past weekend, this past Saturday against Houston. But then you flip it, and they, in the fourth quarter, have just 3 touchdowns, and that's 4 fewer than the second worst team in the NFL. You can go through injuries and start rattling. To me, that comes down to scheme. And there has to be something in the mix that is more than just, the offensive line lost a player or lost 4 or 5 players. All that factors in. And Malik Willis is awful. But they are getting decent play out of Henry, albeit he's fumbled in a consecutive games, like 3, 4. He's fumbled 5 times over the last 3 games, and he's lost 3 of those. Momentum-changing plays. They're not making them. And Vrabel's team used to make those plays late, and now they're pointing to, Vrabel's pointing post-game in generality, saying he needs the players to show up with more than an 8 to 4:30 attitude. I mean, this is the same group that going into November and midway through November, going into Thanksgiving, they were discussing team first. We don't make excuses. We don't point fingers. We win tight games. They were 7-3, and now they're 7-8 because they have lost any momentum and any of that punch that comes with a Mike Vrabel coach team.
I tell people all the time, Lou Holtz famously said this. He said, the team you have today is not the team you had yesterday, and it's not the team you have tomorrow. As a head coach, you sit there and you marvel sometimes at, man, a week ago we were here, and now look where we're at here. You mentioned back to start November, Vrabel's the coach of the year. The team is the most exciting. To your point about my beloved Colts and Jeff Saturday, 62-0, they've been outscored in the fourth quarter in the last 3 games. 90-9 in the fourth quarter. Now let me ask you a question. Tom Moore, the legendary line coach, told me one time, Dan, fourth quarter, players, not plays. You can scheme 1 or 2 things, make your adjustments, but you get the ball to your best players, and you better have a lot of them. That's why I like Kansas City. I feel like Kansas City just drags another freaking 4-2 guy out, and the Colts put out another 5-0 wide receiver that runs a 5-flat 40. You know what I'm saying? Players, not plays. Unbelievable statement, I think.
Well, think about this. The fourth quarter, and I agree. You mentioned Mahomes. Mahomes and Kelsey have this rapport that I believe there's only, you can count on one hand, I think, of how many teammates, offensive teammates, have that same type of rapport. Diggs certainly does with Allen. Burrow has that with Jamar Chase. But, like, for instance, in Dallas, I don't think Prescott has that with CeeDee Lamb.
No
one has that rapport in San Francisco.
I think Cousins and Jefferson.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's more Jefferson, though, and here's why. If it was about Kirk Cousins would be in the MVP conversation, and instead it's the wide receiver. Wide receivers never won the award, because if the wide receiver is having a big year, it's the quarterback's, it's his great play, and no one's talking about Kirk Cousins. But we're about to see the first 2,000-yard receiver in NFL history, and Kirk Cousins isn't even mentioned. So I agree they do have it, but I think it's more about Jefferson than Cousins. I lean into that. I buy that. But I mean, I guess Brady and Mike Evans, but they don't have it right now.
Right.
If you start going through, I mean, Hurts has it with A.J. Brown for sure. I mean, they're really good friends. They were working out before the trade even happened. But there's not many of those guys. And, you start looking around, and that's how I would describe who's got it and who doesn't in the fourth. When you can just look over and as you line up, Kelsey knows just by how Mahomes looks at him if they're going to change the route and just ad-lib it. That's crazy because no one else is doing that except for just 3 or 4 pairings across the NFL. And normally those are the groups that are making the plays in the fourth in the postseason and winning games that get them to the Super Bowl.
I got to jump back to Cousins. Is Kirk Cousins lucky to be in the spot that he's at, or is Kirk Cousins the most underrated, underappreciated, most maligned guy with big numbers ever?
Well, until this year, I would say he's extremely lucky to be in that spot because he had the 3-year, $80+ million fully guaranteed deal. And now what he's done is he's been paired with an offensive-minded head coach. And it's now a pass-first offense. Prior to this year, he was in a run-first offense with Dalvin Cook. And while they still have Thielen and Jefferson and Cook, it's flipped, right? They added Hawkinson. They have now pieces around him to where he can just be Kirk Cousins. He doesn't have to, throw the 50-yard bombs, even the 20-yard air yard passes. It's just got to be short to intermediate. And that's Kirk Cousins. And that's okay. Like, I would describe that with Ryan Tannehill. So, because you can win games with that, but you have to have more than just Kirk Cousins' average play. He's got the first half against Indy. That Kirk Cousins,
yeah.
If that happens in the postseason against a better team, a far better team who will be facing the postseason, I don't care who makes it.
Yeah,
they're not winning. They're not coming back. They're not coming back from a 20-point deficit at that point. I don't believe, not 33. So, yeah, I mean, he's good, not great, but he's got some really talented players around him. He has a great wide receiver, and I think that's the difference.
If I said to you, last thing before I let you go, you have a vote for, I'm going to give you 3 things.
Okay.
Player of the year, MVP, whatever you want to say. And then both of the NFC and the AFC, the team to come out of it. Who you got? All 3.
The team to come out where?
From the NFC and the team to come out of the AFC, and who is the MVP of the league?
MVP of the league for me is right now Patrick Mahomes. Jefferson's going to win it if he gets 2,000 yards. He needs to average. I think he needs to average 122 yards per game to break Calvin Johnson's all-time record, which is just beneath 2,000. And I think they'll go for it. They absolutely will go for it with him because he's already campaigning for the first time. He's being asked about MVP. But right now it's Patrick Mahomes, and it's by default, not because of his poor play or anything against Mahomes. I think Hurts was leading it before he got hurt. Out of the NFC, I'm taking Philadelphia. Again, they were running all over people a year ago. They've got the best offensive line, or one of the best offensive line, top 3 in the NFL. And they now have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and plenty of weapons around them to make them a true threat with a defense that can flat out rush the passer. They got 55 sacks on the year. So, yeah, I'm taking Philly. And I'm taking Cincy. They're poised. They're very well coached with their entire coaching staff. Full trust in Burrow. That's a team that can go on the road and win. They can go to Buffalo and win. They can go to Kansas City and win. We've seen it. And, I'm not sure. I think home field matters in the AFC Championship game, except for Cincinnati, because they just have this, with this brash chip on the shoulder attitude that I think follows and I think travels. There's plenty of guys that can step up for them. Give me Cincinnati and Philadelphia in the Super Bowl in Arizona on Fox.
Yeah, it was kind of a redundant question from my earlier conversation, but I wanted to make sure that we got that. Here's what Jefferson had to say. Having the type of season I'm having, I feel like there's a conversation that needs to be had for me to be MVP. That's to your point on what Justin Jefferson is saying.
And hey, he has destroyed opposing defenses. I've got a column that posts tomorrow. 35 catches, 479 yards. He's averaging 160 yards per game in his last 3 games. And again, he's got to average 122 over the next 2. It's not even Calvin Johnson's record. 122 per game over the next 2 gets him 2,000. There's never been a receiver to do it. Calvin Johnson's record, all-time record for the NFL, is 1,964, and that was back in 2012. So, and he's got Green Bay and Chicago coming up, and he's already just throttled those defenses this year. I think he can do it, and if he does it, all the voters are going to swing his way, and he will be the first wide receiver to ever win Most Valuable Player in the National Football League.
And my vote would go to Jalen Hurts unless what you just said happened. I know Hurts got hurt, but I just think he's been so good in both areas, running the football, throwing. I mean, honest to God, you think about that for just a second, right? You think about, here's a guy that got benched for Tua. Yeah. Here's a guy that, it's pretty amazing, actually. Mac Jones in that room, all there. Last thing before I let you go. I don't know about you, and maybe this is me being hot take guy, but I've kind of had enough of Tua and McDaniel and the Miami Dolphins. I've kind of had enough of the praise on these guys. 4 in a row late in the season. You got to win something late, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah. And they've had some situations with Tua. He's back in concussion protocol.
Yeah.
They're going to shut him down, I think, just based on how the year has gone with concussions in general. So, yeah, they're done. And I think the whole concussion saga with Tua over that 3.5 week span really threw them into a tailspin. I don't think they meant to handle it that way, and that's just how things played out. And Tua's been fine, but this past weekend when we saw him throw those 3 straight picks on the final possession against Green Bay, yeah, you saw a scenario that I think many would have predicted preseason before they got off to that hot start. I love watching Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and I like Mike McDaniel. I think he's a refreshing new version of what the NFL can be. He doesn't take himself too seriously. He kind of jokes around with some of the interviews that he's on. I like it because it's anti-Belichick in many ways. But and I think many coaches copy the Belichick way because, number one, it's easy. And number two, I think their ownership, wherever they are, expects whatever New England's results are. So they're copying that. And McDaniel's the opposite. And he kind of backdoored his way into that job because of the Flores lawsuit, where they don't go with Sean Payton and Brady. They end up with Mike McDaniel and Tua. And just tying it back briefly to Jalen Hurts. Hurts and Tua were in prove-it years. I think both of them have proven it. Hurts more than Tua. And with Hurts, keep in mind, you mentioned it, like he's replaced by Tua in college. He goes to Oklahoma. And then Bill Polian calls him a running back when he's drafted. And now in a prove-it year, he has done more for himself than anyone. And here's Philadelphia with not many holes. They've got they've got to punch it in a little bit more than what they've done in certain games. But for the most part, there's really no big weakness with them, including backup quarterback Gardner Minshew can spin it. And there's no reason why he can't come off the bench and help them win games.
You know how it is. Indianapolis, we're all mad that we took Matt Ryan and not Gardner Minshew after one game. You know how that goes. Hey, man, looking forward. I'm in with you on Monday. Can't wait. Thank you, my friend.
Yeah, man. Yeah, looking forward to you being here in Music City on the 2nd. We'll be recapping all the college football playoff and bowl games. Got Eddie George coming in with me today on Outkick 360. We start at 3 Eastern. Chad is in Nebraska. His flight was canceled, and he drove 13 hours yesterday, but he has arrived in Nebraska. The question is, can he dig himself out?
I saw a picture on Twitter of that drive, and then I realized, wait, he wasn't just driving to the store to get eggs and milk. He was driving 13 big ones. Holy cow.
Brutal.
Thank you, my friend.
All right, Dan. Appreciate you, man.
See you on Monday. That's Jonathan Hutton. I'll be joining the boys on Monday from Nashville. I'll be doing my show, and then stick around, and Jonathan and I will get her done. All right, we come back. I got a lot to talk to you, but I got NFL coaches as politicians and politicians as NFL coaches when we come back.
College football's in trouble. There's a lot of people trying to keep it from happening.
I think it's a general consensus across the college football landscape. We want to play football.
College football is a huge part of the fall. It's a huge part of Americana itself. just really felt like people in the country needed college football to just feel a little sense of normal.
Big news from the Big Ten as the conference releasing its 10-game football schedule.
We go home thinking there's going to be practice the next day. Everybody gets a text, stay home, everything's canceled.
Big Ten fall football season has been canceled.
We just believe collectively there's too much uncertainty.
I guess what I'm trying to understand, though, Kevin, is that was the same position you had 6 days ago.
The Big Ten is an unmitigated disaster.
There was a ton of confusion. There was presidents saying one thing, there was coaches saying another.
Players had to be silent, coaches had to be silent, ADs had to be silent.
People said, how does what you just did make any sense?
And nobody really knew what the heck happened when they voted to cancel the season.
You make this huge historical announcement, and then Kevin Warren never does a press conference to explain it. It was like a masterclass in how not to handle a crisis.
The word really that was lacking in all of this is transparency.
It felt like a lot of stuff was happening behind closed doors.
Even today, we still don't know what occurred.
So you don't tell us parents, that's fine, but you're not telling the young men that it affects.
We have to make a decision to save the season. What about the history books? What about the rivalry games? What about Paul Bunyan's axe? How is that not going to go to a team this year?
This is a failure of epic magnitude. The Big Ten presidents and leaders should be held accountable for the disastrous decisions that they're making.
Then the commissioner doubles down, saying his decision will not be revisited.
And that's the point. It felt like a war was declared on the Big Ten and Kevin Warren.
Everything turned political.
Because if this is medical, then you would have stopped the game of football a long time ago.
I think the Big Ten leaders will tell you that they probably made a mistake in hindsight.
If I had the chance to do it all over last year, I would make the same decisions that we made.
Hey, welcome back. What a great show we have had for you today. We talked about it earlier, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, when the bags go on the head of your team, that is awful. Awful. And that's what happened to our beloved Colts last night. Just when you thought, dropping back, the human statue, Matt Ryan. And then we went to Sean Ellinger. I don't know why I'm looking that way. And then we went finally to Nick Foles. Just when you thought it couldn't get worse, Nick Foles shows up, and this guy wearing his Andrew Luck jersey put a bag over his head. And a lot of bags were overheads, and a lot of people were walking out, and there was a lot of booing. So, look, hey, Indianapolis, which started out with such high hopes, you got to understand something. On my local show, I would say, hey, look, Colts are going to win 12 to 14 games every year. I got no idea. I think the NFL is impossible. But 12 to 14 every year, what the heck? I mean, it's the easiest division in football, and we're talking about right now the Jaguars. Again, it doesn't matter. I told you this last week. If, and they did, the Titans lose last Sunday or Saturday, whenever the heck they played, the whole thing was going to come down unbelievably to the Jaguars against the Titans to go to the playoffs, because obviously nobody is making it from a wild card perspective in the AFC South. So guess what we've got coming up? This week don't matter. Jaguars play, Titans play Dallas. It does not matter. All that matters is next week. And even giving this, the Colts are sitting on the outside. Even giving this. Now remember, in our world of the Colts, a golden era was coming. A golden era, according to Jimmy Irsay. All chips were in, according to Jimmy Irsay. Remember that. All chips are in. Don't come in the building unless all chips are in. We have the world's greatest general manager who in his sixth year is 46, 51-2 with 0 division championships. I said it, 0 division championships. Actually, it's not 2, it's 1. He's only tied once. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you my list of most full of crap politicians and their sports counterpart. All right? Number 5 on my list of full of crap politicians is none other than President Barack Obama. Barack Obama never had a job in his life. He was a community organizer, whatever the heck that is. I don't know what that is. But he gave a great speech. And in giving great speeches at the Democratic National Convention, he ended up being the guy at the forefront of the Democratic Party. And he won not 1 term, but 2 terms, and literally did nothing as president. I know people can give me a list of stuff that he supposedly did. But when he spoke, it was glorious because he legitimately said nothing. 0. Zip. Nada. In fact, it was so funny that even the most liberal of shows, 30 Rock, made fun of the hope and change and the fact that President Obama, well, he did he did that thing that one time, right? That's how the most liberal of shows, with Tina Fey and Alec Baldwin, described President Obama. Who, ladies and gentlemen, who is his sports counterpart? Well, I got to tell you, I got to go to our guy, Chris Ballard. Chris Ballard, when he got the job in Indianapolis, talked about the rivalry with New England is on, raised a glass in the Colts TV show, and gave this impassioned speech about how, ladies and gentlemen, yes, how we're going to kick everybody's you-know-what. You could put Chris Ballard next to any of these guys. You could put Chris Ballard next to any politician that you want. Chris Ballard is our guy. Chris Ballard can sling it. Chris Ballard stands there very smugly, like President Obama does, looks at you like you're an idiot. Remember that meme with Obama, like, hey, I don't know. That's our guy right there, Chris Ballard. When Obama speaks, and I've said this many times, nothing actually comes out of his mouth. What comes out of his mouth is something that he hopes gets put on the side of a building. He hopes it becomes the next Gettysburg Address. When Chris Ballard speaks, you know what it is? He hopes people believe it as gospel. The rivalry is back on with New England. We're going to kick everybody's you-know-what, blah, 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 blah. Bah. Number 4 on my hit parade. Numero 1, 2, 3, 4 on my hit parade is a guy you may not know. His name is Dan Quayle, a nondescript senator out of Indiana, Huntington, Indiana. Dan Quayle was a young, good-looking guy. Dan Quayle, they felt, could carry the Midwest. Dan Quayle was appointed by the number 1 Bush, the earlier Bush, George H. Bush, as his vice president, and people gave a collective, huh? Who the hell's Dan Quayle? It sent everybody running to payphones to make a phone call at the time to say, what? Who is what now? Who is Dan Quayle? I don't know. Who is this guy? Well, turns out he ended up being the vice president, turned out. He got destroyed by a man named Lloyd Benson. Lloyd Benson was a Texas longtime congressman. Dan Quayle tried to compare himself to JFK. Quayle's problem was Lloyd Benson knew JFK. And Lloyd Benson said to Dan Quayle, I worked with JFK. I knew John F. Kennedy. And you, sir, are no John Kennedy. And you could see Dan Quayle just go like this as the debate was transpiring. But guess what? Quayle and Bush prevailed. Now, Quayle never said anything meaningless. He wasn't meaningful, excuse me. He wasn't respected by anybody, anytime, anywhere. But you got to give the guy some credit. He's a good-looking dude, played a lot of golf, did his time, and then he went away. And forever, he'll be what? 2-term vice president. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that's pretty good. It's a guy from Huntington, Indiana. So the guy that compares with Dan Quayle, I believe, is Josh McDaniels, the beleaguered coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. Josh McDaniels seems to be the kind of guy that, like Quayle, got a job at a young age. Like Quayle, has a very punchable face. Like Quayle, has a very smug look about him. Like, I'm smarter than you, even though I'm really not. I'm more clever than you, even though I haven't had a clever thought in my entire life. I don't know. There are certain guys with punchable faces in the media. Jeff Passan comes to mind. Josh McDaniels comes to mind. That's just off the top of my head. Some would say Joe Burrow, but I don't know if I buy that. Joe Burrow seems to be pretty tough. But Josh McDaniel and his mouth, whenever he talks, I hear the same thing I used to tell my kids when their mother would talk. What do you hear when you hear mommy talk? Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, you wonder why I'm divorced. Number 3, numero tres. Heels up. All heels up. Camilla Heels Up Harris. We call her Heels Up for a variety of reasons. Jennifer understands. Camilla made her way to the vice presidency. Some might say, I don't know, stooping her way. There are rumors that she was the personal attaché to the guy, what was he, the Oakland or the San Francisco mayor, Brown? Heels Up, every time Heels Up speaks, it's a lesson in stupidity. Heels Up talks about how she and all of her friends, when they were little, celebrated Kwanzaa. Well, we all know that Kwanzaa was started by a guy who enslaved young African-American women, beat young African-American women, and, of course, wanted them to get away from Christianity and really didn't take hold until the 90s. But apparently Heels Up was ahead of her time. And Heels Up said, hey, look, we would gather around, and she called them the elders. The elders would come around. Yeah, you know what's great about Heels Up? Heels Up can just look at you and lie. She can just look at you, stare you in the face, and lie right to you. I don't know that there's anybody in sports quite like Heels Up. I tried to figure out, all right, who just babbles nonstop, looks at you and lies? I don't know. In fact, I'm going to go to the YouTube chat, or I'm going to put it on Twitter and say, because I tried like crazy, I had to have Heels Up come in here, because when Heels Up speaks, I absolutely laugh. I do. I just laugh. If she's talking, I'm like, what did she just say? What did she just say? I don't really know. I don't really understand. I don't. I guess maybe when Heels Up speaks, I think of Jimbo Fisher. Because Jimbo Fisher, when he started babbling, back when Nick Saban came at him, seemed a bit, I don't know, what's the right word? Befuddled. He was throwing things against the wall, Jimbo Fisher was. And now, since his highly paid, or you can make the argument, legally acquired recruiting class at Texas A&M is leaving, he continues to babble on. So I guess Jimbo Fisher is the best, I think, comparison to our friend Heels Up, but I'm not 100% sure about that. And if you get offended by the Heels Up, yeah, I don't care. It's a great nickname. It's a wonderful nickname. Jimbo Heels Up Fisher. Camilla Heels Up Harris. Well, that's offensive. Yeah, okay. Well, look, as I tell you, this is a newborn baby. The doctor smacks a newborn baby on the backside. You know what he didn't say? Your life is going to be so rich, so full, you will never be offended. Hey, you get offended. It's an emotion. It's like what Jimmy B said. You laugh, you cry, you smile, you think. It's a good day. That's a heck of a day. You offend, you get offended. You cry, you whine, you moan. It's a good day. What can I tell you? It's a nice day. I'm not saying it's the greatest day, but I'm saying quit being offended by everything. Heels Up and Jim Fit. Senile Joe Biden, number 2. When I look at old Joe Biden, they're actually, other than being a complete and utter racist, I mean, nobody back in the 70s was more racist than Joe Biden. In the history of our country, we never have had a president in the modern history. I can't speak to the 1800s. I don't know what those guys were into. It was a different world. They were crazy. But nobody's more racist than Joltin' Joe Biden. Joltin' Joe Biden back in the 70s talked about not letting his kids go to integrated schools. And he used awful words. Then in the 90s, Joe Biden actually started making some sense. Joe Biden was actually more Republican than anything else. Now Joe Biden's just gone. Joe Biden, as you knew him, is no longer the racist idiot. He's just an idiot. He's just a senile idiot that doesn't know where he is. He's just a guy that has to go, oh, what? Where am I? He is. So Greg Popovich is Joltin' Joe Biden. Greg Popovich speaks, and we go, huh? Say what? What? Old white men are bad, Popovich says. He's an old white man. Huh? Pop. When Biden had Obama, I suppose you could say that Biden was, I don't know, kind of a running mate / maybe an advisor. He wasn't senile then. When Popovich had David Robinson and Tim Duncan, he actually won games. But now that Popovich is on his own, left to the devices of being a coach, Popovich doesn't win squat. And now that Biden doesn't have Obama shielding and Biden can do what Biden wants to do, whatever is bought and paid for, as we all know, he has decided to give an open checkbook to a war that doesn't involve us. He's decided to wide open our borders. He's decided to not pay attention to fentanyl coming in. He's decided that the stock market doesn't matter and we all have to suffer. Yet, ladies and gentlemen, let's give $3.6 million to the whatever her name is, Michelle Obama trail in a billion, trillion, zillion dollar omnibus bill because Joe Biden is bought and paid for by everybody. So Joe Biden, you are, ladies and gentlemen, you are Greg Popovich, and we thank you. In the history of politicians, nobody, and I mean nobody, is more full of crap, more evil than Bill and Hillary Clinton. Now, I don't care what side of the aisle you are on. Both sides of the aisle will admit Bill and Hillary Clinton are legitimately the most evil. And I mean this in the worst sense of the word. Evil, awful, murderous, evil people that there has ever been in public office, modern world division. Not talking about George Washington and his, wooden teeth. I'm talking about in the modern world, there is nobody more evil, more full of you-know-what than Bill and Hillary Clinton. You know, most of us have friends. Most of us have a wide range of friends and business associates and folks that were around, right? A lot of us. So you go back to grade school, you go through high school, you go through college, early jobs, other jobs, working your way through. You know, if you really broke it down, your web of friends is great. Nobody, and I mean this sincerely, nobody has had more deaths among their people than the Clintons. I have a neighbor. That is a Clinton. She is second cousin to Bill Clinton. The first cousins come in every year. The first cousins come in and they enjoy the Indianapolis 500, the house right next to mine. And my neighbor laughs like crazy every time. He's a professor at Butler, and he's like, yeah, they came in. I go, what do you do? I go, well, we get out Bill's book, and they say, yeah, that didn't happen. Yeah, that didn't happen. And everybody, even when Bill was in his 20s, in their own family, said, no, no. You can't be alone with Uncle Bill. No young women can be alone with Uncle Bill. Now, I want you to think about that. There are at least 34 deaths of friends, associates, people around the Clintons. 34. Now, I would guess that of those deaths, the Clintons were involved in none of them. I don't know, but damn, 34 people. 34 at last count. Now, I happened to find an article, and this was from 4 or 5 years ago. So do I have to add Jeffrey Epstein in there? Oh, I don't know. And I want it very clear. I am not suicidal. I'm not. Happy life. Kids over there in the next room. My wife. We're getting ready to play pickleball, work out, go golfing, whatever. So I'm just telling you, anything that happens to me, I blame Bill and Hillary. I just do. I'm sorry. I just do. Evil personified, corrupt personified, full of crap personified, to the point where I can only give you Calvin Sampson. That's all I can give you. I mean, I don't know. You know, the criminal version of the Clintons has got to be, I don't know, closer to Charles Manson than anything else. But I got to tell you, in sports, who keeps bouncing back? I don't know. Calvin Sampson got Houston or got Oklahoma on probation, went to Indiana, was dumb, didn't care. I don't know. I don't think anybody has ever put it away like the Clintons have put it away. And by it, I mean has never put the corruption out there like the Clintons. When your own family says, yeah, well, we knew for a long time you couldn't have young women in the same room as Uncle Bill. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a problem. Now, seriously, that's a problem. And people can say, well, that's not true. I don't know. I'm just telling you what a family member said. And when reading the book, basically anything good was like, yeah, that's not true. Yeah, that's not what happened. No, that's not the way that went. Evil, ladies and gentlemen, evil. And I don't, like I said, I don't have it. I don't have any. Dan, check the brakes on your car. I know. Dan, keep your head on a swivel. I know. Indy Spanglish, keep doing your thing, my friend. I know. Elon Musk keeps tweeting that he isn't suicidal. I know. You got to. You got to keep tweeting it out. Nick Chaplin, Bill Clinton went to Epstein Island. A lot. And Epstein died. I wonder. All right. Hey, Dan, didn't you understand Bill's just looking for a little something, something? Come on, man. That's the YouTube chat. I don't have anybody in sports. I guess O.J. Simpson would be the closest thing. By the way, I got a text from yesterday. You're not going to believe this. Cato Kalin. Look up Cato Kalin. I think we're going to have Cato on the show as soon as he gets back from a little bit of a vacation. I didn't text him back yet. I'm gonna. I figured the man's on vacation. Leave him alone. But yeah, that's it. Cato Kalin. It's my boy. All right. Who's our woke-a-dope of the day, Dylan? What do we got, Ryan? crap, I can't see that. I got to look. I got to get in here. Hang on, caller. Is there anything better? Anyway, so Kate, okay, keep that up for a little bit, will you? Because I want to make sure I can read it. I saw this. This woman charges $480 an hour to help Gen X and millennial workers overcome their fear of talking on the phone. And I swear to God, if you look at that woman, she looks exactly like somebody that would want to teach people fraudulently, I assume, to get over their fear of talking on the phone. If you have a fear of talking on the phone, don't. There can't be anybody on the other end of that phone that wants to hear from you because you're such a sorry dirtbag. You're such a sorry excuse for a person. I'm afraid of talking on the phone. You shouldn't live. Don't kill yourself, but you shouldn't be around people. I don't want to talk on the phone. Go away. The world is an amazing place. And we are here to straighten out the entire world. Let's be honest. That's the beauty of this show. We straighten you out. Crean did a wonderful job. Tom did, talking basketball today. Jonathan Hutton, we talked NFL. We got into politics. We're going to have a monster week this week with a ton of guests. And I thank you all for being here. All right, last thing. Last thing before we go. Don't forget, I am going to be co-hosting with Hutton. You got me Monday, a week from yesterday. You got me all day on Outkick. And what a relief it is. What did you guys put up? I couldn't see it. Will Russell Wilson's contract for the Broncos turn out to be the worst of all time? You know who's going to be close? I think the Cleveland Browns, Deshaun Watson, is going to be close. I've said this for years. We got to watch Deshaun Watson, at least against the Colts, twice a year, at home once a year. And I got to tell you, I think he's a terrific talent. I'm sure he's a great leader before all this stuff came down. But I got to tell you, Deshaun Watson would fumble on the one. He would fumble a handoff. He wouldn't get it. He made plays to get you beat. Now, am I going to tell you that Deshaun Watson is going to ever be as bad as what Russell Wilson was this year? Maybe. Maybe he's already been as bad this year, but the Cleveland Browns are only paying him $1 million this year. The Cleveland Browns are in pretty good shape in terms of Watson's contract. But before you immediately go to Russell Wilson having the worst contract, don't forget, Deshaun Watson's contract is sitting right there. It's sitting right there. And last thing, I don't know the particulars. I've read them, but I don't really know them because there's always a backstory. But why is the NFL allowing Deshaun Watson to play with 30 allegations of sexual abuse by 30 different women? And Trevor Bauer, apparently, this is what I've read, you tell me I'm wrong, in one situation of a consensual nature, got a little rough, apparently. And courts threw out both. Somebody, maybe tomorrow, will get into why Trevor Bauer has been suspended for so long, or is the Deshaun Watson and all of his suspensions the same thing? I don't know. But it seems like one guy had one ridiculous incident, which if you want to suspend him for, I'm for that. Another guy had 30. I don't know. It's interesting. Something to ponder as we move on to tomorrow. But Trevor Bauer apparently could play. I got to tell you, at least what I've read, I'd have no problem with him on the Cubs. Maybe you all would. Nobody seems to have a problem with Deshaun Watson being on the Browns. No one seems to even be talking about Deshaun Watson anymore being on the Browns. I don't know. Don't at me about it either. Guys, Dylan, Tyler, Ryan, Eric, Davey, the whole crew, thank you. Tom Crean, thank you. Of course, Jonathan Hutton, thank you. We'll be back at it tomorrow. I can't wait. I love doing this show, and I love the fact those of you showed up in record numbers on the YouTube chat and, of course, here today. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Be safe. It's a big bowl game day. Send me your bets because I'm struggling, at least yesterday. See you tomorrow.